There was one scene at the beginning of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings that instantly told me I would love this movie. A scene that symbolically expresses the main theme of the story, which is maturing. The scene I'm talking about is this one. Now, before we continue, bear in mind I'll be looking at this movie from a Jungian perspective, as in, what does the following scenes mean symbolically and psychologically for the characters and for the story? Also, I've just recently started diving deeper into analytical psychology, so I don't claim this analysis is the one and only truth. I've also tried looking at different symbols in the perspective of Chinese mythology. So what I'm trying to say is, this is a mere attempt at applying the knowledge I've gathered until now. Part 1. Wedding the Anima. Until this point, we've heard all about the legend Wen Wu. He discovers a great power which he uses throughout the centuries for conquering kingdoms and for toppling governments. It's for completely selfish and egoistical reasons, and when you put it like that, he seems like the typical power-hungry, cardboard villain that most superhero movies push at us. And the only thing that impressed me at the beginning was the fact that it was the Tony Leung who played the character, one of the best actors with some of the most expressive eyes on the planet. So I went into this movie completely blind, I didn't know anything about it. But when the fighting for peace and good lady kicked the supposed villain's egoistical ass, and he fell in love with her because of it, I became astonished. And then this choreography they're doing, yes, it starts as a battle, but soon after she reveals her face, their moves and the energy surrounding them shifts. Suddenly I'm no longer watching them fight, they're dancing. I look at their love story from a Jungian perspective, and I realize this movie basically starts with the integration of the masculine and the feminine in the faces of Wen Wu and Yang Li. In an interview for GQ, Tony Leung says this about his character.
因為我唔想再嗰個 focus 喺度做一個大壞蛋，因為大家都知佢係大壞蛋。咁我嘗試去探討下佢個內心，即係點解會變成一個咁嘅人，同埋我多啲係因為佢細個嘅一啲得唔到自尊啦，同埋好似一個 underdog 咁，佢爸爸又睇佢唔起，佢屋企有家暴。咁係因為佢得到 super power 之後，佢開始想揾翻自己嘅自尊。佢覺得有權力，可能就有自尊啦。但係有時自尊去到極端嘅時候，就變成一種自戀狂。
We have domestic violence in his childhood, low self-esteem that progressed in a thirst for power, and I'm assuming a missing mother figure in his life. The end result is a man whose goal in life is to keep destroying and conquering, desperately searching for that one conquest that would finally fill the void in his heart. All of this tells me that Wen Wu doesn't have a good relationship with his anima. The anima and the animus, according to Jungian psychology, are two of the archetypes of the unconscious mind. By integrating the various archetypes an individual has, they can achieve the ultimate goal, which is individuation, or in other words, wholeness. The anima is the feminine part of the unconscious psyche of a man, while the animus is the male part of the psyche of a woman. These concepts are not identical with gender, so don't think about them in this way. Imagine them more as two different energies, opposite of each other but complementary. One can't be without the other, or else it's incomplete. When the archetypes are repressed or forgotten by the individual, it reflects on the way they communicate with the outside world and with themselves. In Wen Wu's case, he can't reach psychological maturity or wholeness because he hasn't united with his inner divine feminine part. He has repressed it. When that happens, and it continues for a long time, we can see an individual who often develops toxic masculine traits such as aggression, coldness, ruthlessness, egoism. Leung didn't say anything about Wen Wu's mother, if he knew her or not, but we now know that even if she was present in his life at some point, even if she was kind and loving to him, it would have been overshadowed by the destructive force of the male figure in his life, his father. Because of that, Wen Wu became the villain we now know him from the beginning of the movie, having not been able for all those years to meet a projection of his anima and to have it awaken the feminine energy inside of him. Until he bumps into Yang Li. There's a particular moment where they start moving in a circular way, and while I was watching it, the image of the yin-yang symbol popped into my mind. The famous Tao symbol expresses the Chinese cosmological idea of the duality. The feminine and the masculine energies are in a constant state of flow, always connected and transforming into one another. You could call it a dance of opposites even. Joined together, the two counterparts represent the balance they must achieve for the world to be in a state of harmony. Circular-shaped formations are archetypal symbolic images for the self with capital S, for the wholeness of the personality. They represent evolution and revelation and the endless process of growth. Circles can also symbolize protection. The 10 rings are circles. The dragon at the final battle moves the waters of the lake in a circular shape around the dweller in darkness. The circle is an important figure that appears a lot in the movie. Simu Liu calls Wen Wu and Yang Li's fight a love song. I would call it a love dance, but it's all the same. A fight scene between two characters that feels more like a dance of opposites is something that has always captivated the audience.
That's how I get to meet the timekeepers. One zero.
1-1.
I've seen what I need to see.
Me too. She's my co-pilot.
Jung says, when animus and anima meet, the animus draws his sword of power, and the anima ejects her poison of illusion and seduction. The outcome need not always be negative, since the two are equally likely to fall in love, a special instance of love at first sight. Through the meeting with Yang Li, Wen Wu discovers his inner feminine aspect and connects with her. He essentially projects his anima onto her, and likewise we can say that Yang Li projects her animus, her masculine part, onto him. When a man and a woman project their positive images onto each other at the same time, we have the state of falling in love. If the man gets in touch with his feminine parts, with his positive anima, because there's a negative one too, he starts displaying compassion, patience, tenderness, vulnerability, understanding, and reveal of his emotions. The movie shows us this exact transformation. Wen Wu gives up a life full of violence and power searching. We see him be lovable to his wife, patient and kind to his children. He becomes a completely different person who is now happy and content. He essentially weds his anima, and by doing so, awakens his inner feminine aspects, which balance his masculine ego. Part 2. Loss of the mother and of the feminine. All is well until the mother suddenly dies. Her death is meant to be understood in a metaphorical, symbolic sense. The death of the mother and the search for the mother are popular motifs in mythology and fairy tales throughout the world. In most of the cases, it represents the beginning of growing up for the hero. The care and protection the hero or the heroine has received until now is over, because they need to mature up and get a hold of their own destiny. In the case of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, I choose to interpret this in a different way. Yes, the theme of the movie is maturing, but this maturing happens by integrating the feminine and the masculine energies, through which the individual becomes whole. A family is lacking a mother and a wife, and this suggests that the story will reflect on the search and the integration of the anima. Here, the mother's death means a symbolical loss of the feminine, a prevalence of the masculine, and a breaking of the balance. Wen Wu has lost his connection to the anima through losing his wife. This may be due to the fact that he hasn't dealt with his shadow adequately, and because of that, he hasn't truly achieved perfect wholeness or individuation. He hasn't integrated everything that was hiding in his unconscious. He loses his wife and he blames himself, for it happens because of his past violent days. He feels that by embracing the feminine aspects of himself, he has become weaker for not being able to protect his family. He doesn't understand that the anima is a part of himself which he should fully accept and integrate. He identifies with his negative masculinity and refuses to accept his nurturing, kind, and emotional side. The latter gets pushed back into his unconscious. This is also externalized by his apparent ignorance of his daughter, who looks so much like his wife. The loss of the mother figure reflects strongly on the children. Both Wenwu and Shang-Chi grow up with cold, emotionally distant, violent fathers. When Shang-Chi kills, his conscious and unconscious go into conflict. Shang-Chi realizes the awful deed and he has the option to go back and confront his father, and by doing so, to confront his own inner self. Instead, Shang-Chi chooses to run away and repress all of those negative emotions, along with his desire for the feminine. All of this, the good and the bad, gets pushed back into his unconscious and he gets stuck in a state of adolescence. It's no wonder he abandons his little sister in a similar way his father does. His sister, who is a bright reminder of his mother and his feminine aspect. Shang-Chi doesn't know who he is, or more accurately said, he doesn't want to deep dive into himself to accept who he is. In the state he is right now, he is incomplete. Part 3. The Search for the Mother and Meeting the Shadow. Shang-Chi, being Wenwu's son, has the task of finishing the journey his father started. It consists of acknowledging and accepting his shadow, and integrating the masculine and the feminine parts inside of him. In a way, Wenwu knows this unconsciously, so he initiates the return of his son. Wenwu becomes the force that pushes Shang-Chi to confront his sister and his past after years of isolation. I think Wenwu doing this even has a redemptive feel to it. The search for the mother, which Wenwu begins, is a symbolic search for the anima he has repressed. By passing this task on to his children, he is sending them on a quest for finding their inner femininity and for connecting with their mother. But before that happens, Shang-Chi must first stand in front of his shadow. Jung states that the encounter with the shadow is the apprentice piece in the individual's development, that with the anima is the masterpiece. The shadow is made of everything that is unknown and hidden of the personality. Everything that is dark and shameful, or everything that is the opposite of how the individual acts on the outside. Jung states that everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. At all counts, it forms an unconscious snack, thwarting our most well-meant intentions. In Shang-Chi's case, he is trying hard to forget his violent urges. He desperately wants to erase the fact that he has taken someone's life. Until the big call for the adventure happens, Shang-Chi is living the most ordinary life a person can have, in an attempt to escape from his dark tendencies. What he needs the most is to face them head-on. Yes, it's painful, and it's shameful, and at the end of the day, it's tempting to lean on them. His first real struggle happens when he meets what I assume from the flashback is the other person other than Wenwu who taught him how to kill and fight. The dead dealer. We learn that he was abusive to Shang-Chi and left him with some traumatic memories from the harsh training he was put through. The fight with his teacher unlocks Shang-Chi's repressed dark nature. Shang-Chi would have killed him if he wasn't stopped at the last second, and it's really interesting to note that the dead dealer is someone who Shang-Chi probably would have turned out like if he had not run away. Dead dealer is a loyal follower of Wenwu and a lethal weapon. He is covered from head to toe and even a mask hides his face. He seems inhuman and emotionless, the perfect killing machine that lives only for slaying. Dead dealer plays the role of Shang-Chi's shadow. Now, Shang-Chi has to confront this side of him, and he has no other choice, because his shadow has resurfaced and it is not going back into his unconscious. A little side note here, I think the movie handled that dealer very weakly. Shang-Chi and him needed to have at least another confrontation before or after that, because it is of great importance to our hero's psychological development. Part 4. Death, Rebirth and Slaying the Monster. From a symbolic point of view, Wenwu and Yang Li represent the masculine and feminine energies in Shang-Chi. He must learn to accept and integrate both aspects of himself. He must accept the courageous, purposeful, strong force his father possesses, and the emotional, gentle, swift energy his mother carries. We have the mother and the father archetype, spirituality and rationality. All of that is displayed through the two fighting styles the parent figures display. That is why when we see Shang-Chi use his mother's techniques, and also at the same time applying the fighting style he has inherited from his father, we, as an audience, know he is on the right path. It is no coincidence that Shang-Chi meets with a sister and an aunt. He meets 3 women who help him through the journey of integrating the anima. He first runs from his sister, leaving her alone to fend for herself. He is terrified of his anima, and that is reflected on the relationship he has with his sibling. We can see at the final battle he has already integrated the anima, and so he refuses to abandon his sister again. They fight together. His aunt is the one who helps him come to terms with the feminine energy, and it makes perfect sense for her to have this role, because she is the next closest thing to a mother he has. After passing on his mother's fighting style, his aunt leaves Shang-Chi to confront Wenwu alone. In mythological aspect, the destiny of the son is often to confront the father and eventually overcome him. It is what Shang-Chi needs to do in order to fully accept his shadow and his masculine energy and to integrate his feminine side. In the final 3rd act of the story, our hero gets thrown into a lake. Until now, he has been relying solely on aggression and desperation against every opponent. His father has now beaten him and Shang-Chi is sinking. Water is a feminine symbol for the unconscious. It is no wonder Shang-Chi finally connects with his mother while being underwater, as it is the mother's element. Jung writes that water is the valley spirit, the water dragon of Tao, whose nature resembles water, a yang, the masculine energy, embraced in the yin, the feminine energy. The act of falling in deep waters represents the consciousness getting in touch with the unconsciousness. Being in water has a healing effect and is a premise for transformation. There is always some kind of struggle or pain that the hero must suffer through until he learns how to navigate in this hidden world. The hero always dies, either literally or symbolically, only for him to come out of the water completely reborn into a new identity. This death and revival concept is an important archetypal motif, through which the old infantile self ends and a new mature self comes out. Joseph Campbell states, "The black moment is the moment when the real message of transformation is going to come. At the darkest moment comes the light." Or, in other words said, after the descent comes the ascent. Shang-Chi meets the Great Protector and it feels like meeting the spirit of his mother. Eastern dragons have a different symbolic meaning than Western ones. Campbell says this, "Our Western dragons represent greed, however the Chinese dragon is different. It represents the vitality of the swamps and comes up beating his belly and bellowing ha ha ha. That's a lovely kind of dragon, one that yields the bounty of the waters, a great, glorious gift." The Chinese water dragon is a life giver and a bringer of change. It also embodies the mother archetype and the feminine energy, as it is after all connected to the water element. At the final battle against the Dweller of Darkness, the monster that must be slain by the hero, Shang-Chi confronts it with the help of the water dragon and with the use of the powerful rings. Shang-Chi has achieved the integration of the anima inside him and has balanced it with his masculinity. He defeats the monster, circling it with water and pushing it down with a blast, combining both his father's and his mother's legacy, integrating the masculine and the feminine energies, and by doing so, becoming whole and achieving psychological maturity.